All right, guys, we should be live over here. Jason, thank you for taking the time to share your story with us. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Some of the best things you can do is actually talk to somebody who's in the middle of turning around their marriage, because then we're not talking about philosophy, we're not talking about strategy, we're actually talking about a real guy, real family, real husband, real father. And Jason, I'm excited to interview you. Why don't you give guys a little bit of a background, just a little bit about who you are? Forget before we get to the marriage. Who's Jason Allen?
My name's Jason. I'm from Canada, so I'm not from the US. 48 years old. Basically, my background's accounting. I'm a director for the company I work with, and I've been married to my wife for 18 years and been together for 20. We have 4 kids together, 2 biological kids and 2 stepsons that I had there that she had previous to us getting together.
Gotcha. And just for the guys who are new and have no idea like what goes on in the Facebook group or what AMFT is about, can you give a little bit of a background of what was going on in your life, in your marriage, or what wasn't going on right before you joined Amazing Marriage Fast Track? A little bit of a snapshot.
So before my wife had come out with the term "in love but not in love with you" to me, and I started doing some stuff, trying to search around for things that would be helpful. Couldn't really find anything that kind of clicked, and then basically we put the house up for sale. And then when we put the house up for sale, that's when she said that she was looking to get separated and move into her own place. And that's roughly about the time that I found your website on the Facebook group.
And Jason, can you explain when you put up the house for sale, was that just happened to be, or was that part of this sort of marital challenges or navigating the separation issues, or what was going on there?
Before or now, I would say that realistically for me, I was trying to do everything. And in my mindset, head down, just to the grind, make sure everything's comfortable. I had a daughter that turned 16, and all of a sudden I had another vehicle and another gas to pay and all this stuff. And I was struggling to figure out where I could have ends meet. And so that was why we put it up. We figured we're all commuting to the city every day. My daughter sometimes twice a day. Just realistically, it would probably be cost savings to move to the city.
1 second. So when you actually put up the house for sale officially, it was not directly connected to your marriage cancer. You weren't. You didn't see it coming. You thought it was just like a financial decision.
Yeah, I've usually covered the financial aspect of things, that I figured that this
So
was a
one
better
second. So 1 second. So what happened? You put it up for sale. Then your wife says what?
probably a couple weeks after. She comes to me and she said, I don't see us moving to the city together. When we sell the house, we'll go our separate ways.
That was your introduction to seeing your marriage cancer. That's what it was.
Didn't really pick up on some of the stuff beforehand. It was is I don't know if I was blind, but it wasn't until that one kind of caught me off guard. And still, I had problems sleeping. I'm an overthinker, so I thought about that for a day, and then it was a couple weeks after that, she served me a separation, and I was like, okay, this is real. And
I want to interrupt you for a minute, Jason.
yeah,
Like, for the guys watching this, what you just shared is actually helpful. Part of marriage cancer, for a lot of men, even if you have no idea what marriage cancer is, right? One of the symptoms is you don't see the problem coming. You don't see it coming. You're surprised when there is an explosion in the marriage, or there is a downturn, or your wife says something that you couldn't. How could how could she say this? How could she decide this? How could she suddenly make this? And the emphasis on the suddenly, and as painful as it is a symptom of marriage cancer. And I think it's Jason. I think it's important. I interrupt you because I wanted guys to understand that and have a little bit of context, because you're not the only guy that has gone through this or that will go through this.
we did go through counseling. We did try a counselor before, just to try to improve the marriage.
And
Um, didn't work well. Not to laugh about it, but it didn't work. They gave me context. They gave us stuff to improve the relationship, um, where it was like leave notes of affirmation and date nights and that kind of stuff. But whenever I did that kind of stuff and was trying to follow suit because I wanted to fix things, it was like, why'd you leave that note? Oh, you're needy because you want to go out on the date. And that's not what it was. But
Right. If you just try to go on dates, say words of affirmation, try to figure out your wife's love language, try to implement it, try to hug her or kiss her, and you don't understand how she sees you, you're gonna not just be frustrated, you're probably gonna make things worse because your wife's perception of you and the way she evaluates your decisions in the relationship is very different than what you think, because she has an image of you built up over time in her head. And if you don't understand what that image is, you're going to try to invest in the marriage and actually be taking away from the relationship without realizing it. And I know you know this, Jason, but I think I just wanted to explain on a simple level because you're very deep and you like details. Just knowing as an accountant, you have to know details. It's important, and I just wanted to simplify it for the guys who are joining. And guys, I'm just curious from the guys who are joining, who are watching this, do you relate to any of this so far? Do you know that in your marriage there are times where you just don't see it coming, or by the time you see it, it was the problem that your wife expresses is much bigger than you thought it is? Let me know in the comments.
a lot of times men will try to fix things in their marriage when they find out that something's gone bad. And that's trying to do more in the relationship. You're trying to, like, I realized that I wasn't there doing all the household chores. And I know it was part of the relationship. Seeing it outside and understanding that, I'm like, okay, I need to help out, but it doesn't really gain me any advantage to my marriage. She never picked up on it. I didn't get affirmation or positive reinforcement from it. You did it. And then it actually led to more frustration in blatant terms. It's not until I started seeing it from an outside perspective, trying to look outside into my relationship, that I could actually see what wasn't doing anything good for me. I always was one of those guys because I'm analytical, very logical. Everything comes down to logics and science, and some of that was half my problem with my wife.
Yeah, because when you're inside the relationship and you can't see, like from a bird's eye view, you see very little. It's like a difference between being in a helicopter. You'll see a lot more than if you're on the ground. It's just a
Yeah.
reality. Can you describe what was the first epiphany once you actually signed up for Amazing Marriage Fast Track, made that commitment? And by the way, I just want to go guys context. Jason did not do the entire program. Jason was just with us for 2 weeks, for the first 2 weeks of AMFT, and AMFT is a lot bigger than 2 weeks. And that's why it's fascinating, because Jason just scratched the tip of the iceberg, and he's developed so much skills within himself as a husband. And I also want to talk about some of the breakthroughs in the marriage. But what would you say was, like, if you could look back in time, what was the first aha moment or epiphany once you actually joined the regular program that you were like, oh my god, like I wish I knew this 30 years ago or something?
So as far as the marriage cancer, I had all the characteristics of it. It basically, I was sitting there, I was in a not a great place. Obviously, my confidence was a little bit shot. And then when I started the program, I honestly, I told David the first time we consulted that I had no idea what the problem was in my marriage. In the first 2 weeks, I pinpointed what my problem was, and it's the subconscious inner cat that's was playing a factor in my life throughout my life, and I didn't even know it had that such a huge bearing on it. And that you allowed me to see that, to understand it, using different types of things in the program to help me see it from a different perspective, how I'm reacting to it. Obviously, my confidence had to be in a higher spot. I wouldn't have told you that I would have been able to deal with some of the stuff with my wife a month ago without reacting and getting defensive and trying to defend myself or that sort of thing, to now it's I let her act out, and I
So
know.
hold on, you're going too fast over here. Jason, because you're a couple of great things. Let's try to break one of them down. A lot of guys know enough to say, hey, I want to be there for her emotionally. I want to be able to support her. I want to love her unconditionally. Knowing that is not enough, right? You could love your wife and still not be able to be there emotionally for her without seeing your subconscious way of showing up. In other words, when Jason says subconscious inner cat, how many of you guys understand it? Let me know in the comments, okay?
It's the inner cat in me was my emotional reactionary inside thoughts that come out before I can actually logically think anything through. So it's a
Can,
reactionary thing.
can I simplify it? What you said was true, but I want guys to understand that it's really the inner cat is different for every person. And here's what's you got to be careful. Jason's inner cat is different than anybody else's. There are some similarities, but there are some differences. And one of the fundamental things is that everybody has, so to speak, like a film or an aura over them. In other words, people are not actually paying attention to the words you're saying. They're giving a little bit of attention to it, maybe 3 to 5%. 95% of the attention is subconscious cues about your personality. Things that may have happened in the past, things that you're not saying, your facial expression, body language. It could be so many different things going on. And in order for anybody to build a great emotional connection with their wives, in order for someone to be able to unlock their ability to love their wife and to unlock their wife's ability to feel your love, right? You could have love, but your wife won't feel it if you're subconsciously blocked up. If you're messed up, even if you're a good guy and you mean it won't make a difference, okay? It'll be like you may want a good marriage, you may care about your wife, you may be, so you may want to see a sunset, but if you're running towards the east, you're not going to see the sunset. You know what I mean? We're talking about things which are not visible. But when it comes to emotions, when it comes to feelings, when it comes to decisions about a marriage, a woman is stuck behind an image of you. So you have an image built up over time in her head. There are very specific parts of your personality that when you say or do it, you remind her of that image. The other 97% doesn't even matter. And what Jason did, to his credit, was he really threw himself into studying what is that part of me? What is that subconscious part of me, which is literally governing, or in some cases ruining, everything he said or did in his marriage. Not just in his marriage, but also as a parent. And when you have that clarity, it's just like the film goes off your eyes. What was it like, because we just spent quite a bit of time talking about skills, what was it like emotionally when you were able to see clearly the exact parts of your personality or the exact things you were saying or doing that was ruining everything else? What was your first reaction?
Mind blown. Mind blown. I'm like, simple things is you're a logical person. So if she didn't say anything logical, I would be like, well, that's not. Here's the reason why. And I would prove it out to her. And that's almost like I was belittling her, judging. It comes across as judgment. That wasn't what I was ever trying to do.
That's
In my
loaded. By
mind.
the way, this is loaded. You just said a loaded thing in 10 seconds. In his case, in Jason's case, if he was actually going to use a logical explanation to explain to his wife why she's making a mistake, that was part of the 3% that was actually making her upset. He would never have known that, right? If you didn't understand what that subconscious part of you was, you would think, hey, I'm just explaining it to her. Happens to be, I'm right, she's wrong. I owe it to her to explain it to her that I'm right and she's wrong. And in her world, that was actually, without you realizing it, that was belittling her, even though you were.
It put a wall up, and
Yeah.
it continued to put a wall up, and just made our relationship tougher without me knowing, until obviously like the cues and being told. And now I look back and go, I did 20 years of that.
Is it okay? Is it okay if I share with guys a little bit of your background?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I want guys to understand this. All right, this is very important. Jason has had a very traumatic background. Jason, you're 48 years old. At least last time we spoke, and
Yep.
Jason never met his father. Okay, I want you guys to understand. Jason never had a role model as a man, as a husband, as a father, and there was a lot of trauma in your life. And you could have said to yourself, And to me, it's not my fault. And to a certain degree, you would be justified. It is not your fault. But what he did was he took extreme, what I call strategic responsibility. And I'm saying this because I know there are guys watching this who have legitimate reasons for being stuck. And they can sometimes hide behind it. And I don't judge them and you don't judge them. But they're still stuck, right? You could be right or wrong. You're still stuck. And I want to acknowledge, Jason never met his father despite his best efforts. I'm not going to go into the specifics behind that. But that leaves a real imprint on a guy. And now he has stepped up as a husband, as a father for his 2 daughters. There is... What do you want to say?
I'm just gonna say I actually even wrote him a letter, put no guilt on him. I just wanted him to connect. I haven't got the response back. It felt a lot better to get some of that off my chest, and it's an olive branch because I held a lot of my fear of rejection from that letter, and that's why I did it, because I got to be fair to him. He didn't know. Right. Until he found out. So
and it's not, and here we're not here to judge your dad. I'm just giving context so guys understand where you're coming from, how far you've come, what were your challenges, what you've overcome, and kudos to you, because man, it's like that's, you know, what happened was when you said this to me a couple of times, and I think you also texted this to my wife, you didn't realize specifically how the trauma you've been through affected your marriage until you went through the first 2 weeks of the program.
Correct.
Because we're just talking about 3% inner cow. What the hell is that? Okay, we're talking about a real thing. This guy never met his dad. We're talking about a guy who didn't get the guidance that needed to get. And by the way, let me tell you a little secret. There are a lot of guys who have fathers, and their father's been around, and they still didn't get the guidance because their father didn't have what to give. Like, you can't give what you don't have. So I just want you to understand there's no guarantee that having a father around gives you a better chance. But it's still painful. But what you did was you were actually able to see the 3% of your personality that was hurting the marriage, that was a result of trauma. Even though you were aware of trauma for years, and even though you worked on trauma and you did your things, but it was still hurting your marriage. Well, the guys are probably wondering, watching this, okay, what was the first, and I know you've told me a couple of these, but if you had to pick one breakthrough in your marriage or one positive development, what would you say that is?
Like I said, it's just the understanding that when it's coming up, I've got to be in a better place. Confidence is huge for that. I would have told you before the program I might have had some difficulty, but I really have been able to take this. And even if I get rejected from asking, and I said to him, I asked for a hug. And she said, no way in hell. And I just was like, okay. And I didn't take it personally because I've hurt her to the point that it's going to take a while for her to come back. But I'm not going to stop asking, but I asked, and I didn't take offense and show resentment or anxiety or say anything that I might have done if I got that rejection before. I've said, but in the case of David, like the car ride with the daughter, I had a little bit of issues, but I got out of the situation to cool down, and really that's where it comes is trying to have that game plan.
Right. It's about reading the situation correctly, so you can actually nip the problem in the bud before it explodes. So even if something's happened which you don't want, but at least you see him so much earlier, so you don't actually feed the problem. You can extricate yourself from the situation, and then change the picture she has of you. And you mentioned the word confidence, and I want guys to understand, because a lot of guys, a lot of gurus out there talk about, you need to have confidence and masculine energy and leadership, and it's true, but it's incomplete. Like, your confidence cannot flow from confidence. Your confidence has to flow from intelligence, right? Your confidence has to come from an ability to read the situation correctly between you and your wife, to not misinterpret her cues, to not misinterpret your cues. You can't just say, I'm going to have confidence, I'm going to make sure I don't get angry, or I'm not going to get insulted. You can't control not getting insulted. You can't control not getting resentful or anxious. If you don't read a situation correctly, you're going to get resentful, you're going to get controlling, you're going to get anxious, you're going to get frustrated. Those things are going to communicate to your wife, whether you like it or not. That is subconscious. You have no control over it. I'm just trying to pick examples that people can understand, like resentment. People can understand. You could be full of resentment. That will subconsciously communicate to your wife, whether you like it or not, right? So the way to get out of it is to actually read and understand the correct cues about what is going on, what she said, what you should have said, what was the mistake, what you should have done. And that's where the confidence flows.
I think you're 100% correct. It's one thing, like I said, I've been trying to do the physical stuff just in order to exert some energy, so I'm not as stressed out. But ultimately, the reality is where the confidence comes, is understanding the situation way more clearly than I did prior to this, because it's allowed me to look at it a different perspective. You get so ingrained in what you think without thinking about what other people are thinking, and to step out. And after doing some of this stuff, like I said, as limited as I got in the 2 weeks, I tried to pound through as much as I could with your program, David. And a lot of this stuff is still holds so much value to me, because I'm able to take this and I'm putting it into different contexts. So I'm not taking offense to it, or it's just, she says, makes a comment, and I'm sitting there going, you know what, with my image, and it's, instead of knocking me and letting her take it, I'm sitting there going, you're entitled to that opinion. You're an individual. You can say what you want. I'm just going to listen.
And I think it's important for guys to understand. Don't try to imitate Jason, because his awareness is very relevant to his situation. In other words, if you just try to mimic or duplicate or act what Jason is doing, it'll be like a parrot, just trying to. You have to read a situation correctly before just duplicating it. And the key over here, and I see some of the comments, quite a few guys are asking, what's a subconscious inner cat? Okay, simply say, it's your ability to see the exact things you're saying or doing, which is blocking your wife from feeling your unconditional love. It is ruining the rest of your efforts. It's taking the other 97% of what you're saying and doing and making it either irrelevant or backfire on the marriage. Can you tell us a little bit, were there any changes as a parent in terms of your interaction with your daughters, or any changes there?
To me, one of the reasons why I did join was because I've always heard this saying from multiple people, is that your daughters are going to marry somebody like their fathers, and I want them to marry the best version. So that's why I'm doing the work. Ultimately, would I love to have my wife back? Absolutely. But I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and hopefully that works. But my kids are going to be the part of my life for the rest of my life, and I want them to give them the best version of that. And so I've really started working on that, and even given them positive comments or affirmation, because I probably wasn't doing that enough, and I got to build their confidence up. So
yeah. And one of the best things for the confidence is also to see when the parents get along. So it's two separate tracks over here.
Yeah.
What were the things that your wife said that told you that you're on track? Like things that surprised her or shocked her about yourself? Like little comments that your wife gave you that you were like, okay, I'm getting somewhere. I'm moving somewhere.
In the case of the one, like I said, we had a family get together, and it turned out she'd been given the invite weeks ago, but I'd never heard anything except from one of the boys I found out the night before. And then she didn't actually tell me until an hour before the actual event. And I didn't react. I went with the intentions that she asked me to go, even though she had already given me the separation thing. I've had this belief that she still wants to connect. And so I went with no questions asked. And I found out, talking to her the next day, is she said, normally you would have just freaked out with that. And I didn't even realize that was a win. That's just another win on top of a previous win where said she was going to take my daughter, and
So
me not reacting.
So she actually acknowledged the fact that you reacted very differently, and without her realizing that was an admission. Because there's like shades. Like a woman doesn't just say, "Oh, you're the best husband ever." It's a sort of like a, depending on how much marriage counts. It's almost like depending on how overweight your marriage is. It's going to take time to lose that weight. You just got to stick with the process. But there is that recognition. And just a comment over here. Someone mentioned about your wife's deal breakers and the importance of saying it. Those things come up when you can read her correctly. But the wife's deal breakers are not the things she's saying. The wife's deal breakers are a lot deeper because her deal breakers are usually an expression of the pain. So she'll say, for example, I have a boundary. Oh, I want you to sleep in a different house. That's not called a deal breaker. That's called she's expressing her pain. So you have to understand the difference between something which is a real deal breaker, like with something which affects the way she sees you, versus the place she's coming from because she's already upset at you. If she's already upset at you, she wants you to sleep in a separate house. That's not called a deal breaker. That's called a desire. It actually may undermine your marriage if you give her what she wants. Jason, what are you looking forward to in your marriage, as a parent, as your career? Like, where are you going to take this ability to see your own subconscious communication, interact with others, lead others? What are you looking forward to as we wrap up today's conversation?
I know that I'm going to give my kids a better version as a father. I'm going to give her a better version of a husband. Hopefully, like I said, this will lead to reconnecting, not actually continuing with the separation thing. And I haven't heard her talk about it.
She stopped talking about separation?
She gave me the document. I told her I'm good with it. I don't really have any issues with it because I don't want her to make her feel like she's basically boxed in. She's got the freedom to decide. But I haven't heard her talk about it.
That probably surprised her just a little bit.
A little bit, because I said, you know what, I'm fine with it, because reality is I wanted her to be taken care of, because this is a woman that's raised my kids. She's phenomenal. I just didn't know. And so where I'm going with this is I hope we're gonna stay together and grow old, like, ultimately.
If I did not properly learn this skill from my own marriage of how to unlock and unblock subconscious communication, we would have only 3 kids. That's a fact, and we have 7, and God willing, 1 on the way, 1 in the oven, and there's nothing like reconciling with a woman you love, and her seeing the truth about you. And I think one of the beautiful things, and what I appreciate so much about these interviews with my clients, is that when I talk, it's like theory, okay? Like, I went through this years ago, and it's philosophical, it's deep, it may be interesting, but it's not as personal as when I have somebody like you takes the time to, share your stories with other guys. And guys, I want you to pay attention to what Jason just said. He truly loves his wife. You can hear from the way he said it. He didn't use those words necessarily, because this is what she's recognizing, the appreciation for your wife, what she's done for you, what she's been for you, raised your kids, and wanting to be the best version for her. Ask yourself, do I really love her? Do I really want a permanent, long-term happy marriage, or I just want to get out the temporary pain? Because some guys are okay going back and forth, with the ups and downs. So I just want to wrap up and say thank you, Jason, for sharing your story with other men. And I don't know who you're going to touch, who you're going to move, who's going to be affected, but I'm sure the right guy will see this, or a couple of guys. And if we can help them, we will. And we'll take it from there. So guys, please leave your comments under the video. What is your biggest takeaway from Jason's story? What inspired you? What did you learn? All right, guys. God bless you. And we'll see you guys later.